Greetings, nerds. This is Inde Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. Looking forward to talking some X-Men 97 Season 2. We're coming back to it.
We are talking X-Men 97, Season 2, Episode 5, Weapon X, Lies, and DVDs. Wolverine and Morph team up with a ragtag band of former enemies to take down Weapon X, newest deadly creation in this action-packed mutant showdown. Will, what did you think about this episode?
Yeah, well, as far as this episode, I know we are covering the last episodes 5 through 9 here this evening, and so I think whenever we took a break from it, we saw Wolverine going back to sort of it was really a follow up to one of the episodes from the original series as far as X-Men from the 90s, and it was the one, I think, Weapon X, Lies, and Videotape. And so, to contextualize it with some of the clips in this new episode with the DVDs. And so, really the thing that I really thought about this episode, it really got to Wolverine, trying to get his adamantium back, and he's getting teamed up back with the Weapons X group, which was the Black Ops group that he was a part of with Sabretooth and a few other characters that was a part of that Weapons X program. So it was really exploring some of Wolverine's fight with, I guess, some of the humanizing impacts from the Weapons X program that really stood out to me in this episode, and also just Morph's relationship with Wolverine. Was he doing these things out of friendship, or was it out of infatuation, or some other motivation? So those were some of the things I thought about this particular episode.
I did not interpret anything that he was doing out of anything more than friendship.
I think there has been some discussions about his sexuality and whatnot, but I think if that is the case, you could definitely read things as, like I said, purely friendship.
So which, I mean, leads into my overall thought about this episode. Will told me that this episode sucked, and I watched it, and I was entertained. He's like, yeah, episode was fine, and
I didn't say it sucked. I just said it was fun. It wasn't like it wasn't like the most earth-shattering episode, but it was
exactly, I could say about most of the season. So I went in with low expectations, and I did check out a few different times, but then again, lines like "some of us can only be one thing" that Morph says to Wolverine, I thought was really nice. And a lot of their interactions was really interesting. And it didn't feel like a retread of themes that we've seen and heard before from these characters. So I appreciated that. I kind of, in a way, wish that we got a little bit more about like this storyline in the season, but the season started with Apocalypse, it ended with Apocalypse, and it snuck in Rogue and Gambit there. The other thing, like leading into episode 6, Danger.exe, I do see where fans of not only this show, but the original show have really enjoyed it. Because it did feel like a villain of the week episode, while simultaneously exploring a character we haven't explored before. The character I'm referencing is Polaris, of course, Magneto's daughter. And just the fact that we end the big Apocalypse opening arc with Magneto's death, to now have his daughter push the forefront with a very complicated relationship, that did allow for exploration of some interesting themes about grief. I mean, we can only get a grieving Xavier so much. So I like that pivot to then use Polaris as that counterpoint, who is dealing with her own set of grief. So I like that. And it's also just goes back to the presentation of this is a school for the gifted, you know, and that whole concept that we're very familiar with in terms of these Marvel characters in particular.
Yeah. I mean, I did like the whole Danger Room concept, to the next level. And and to the place where the room physically becomes a being. To your point as far as this being like a villain of the week, but it also just some of the real world things as far as like with AI too, where you're seeing like the worst fears of like the computers like really rising up and taking over, and in this context, coming up and taking over, something that's a real challenge to Xavier, to the point where he had to like come up with that his psionic suit to be able to defeat it because it was just so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the end of the episode, we see Apocalypse revive Gambit and have a new host, which leads us into episode 7, Strangeland Savage Heart, which is centered around Nightcrawler and Creed, because Creed gets kidnapped and is taken hostage, and Nightcrawler comes to hold court.
Yeah.
Which Nightcrawler just gives us some great lines at the end of the day. I mean, born of one original sin is sin, a hatred of mutants, and which is not a Nightcrawler line, but like, brother, you may not be a mutant, but you're very much your parents' son.
Yeah.
Essentially, Cooper, his whole defense of Cooper was that Cooper has abandonment issues because he was a human. He was treated differently by his parents, and that that mutated into a hatred for all mutants. So I really like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting. But what about you, Will?
Yeah. I mean, digging into Nightcrawler, and Creed's shared history there, given that Mystique's being their mother, Sabretooth being Creed's father, and he did not get the mutated gene. And having and it was great seeing Colossus back, and Colossus, because of earlier about seeing people being driven by grief, Colossus being driven by grief of his sister's death, and which led him to join with Exodus and that group, and then how the episode really got into the whole philosophical debate as far as the redemption versus inherited trauma and inherited hatred. And so I really, of course they had the great fight. They had the fights too. And of course, we did have the fight with Nightcrawler and Exodus and all that and all, but I thought that what I really liked about this episode, it really did get to the philosophical core that X-Men always will, why is so resonant with people as far as a comic book property, because it does ask these questions, and then even after with the trial, I mean, Kurt ex Colossus, like, what was your verdict? And Colossus is like, well, I was going to for Exodus and all that, but also Nightcrawler did make a judgment too, where he was just like, I'm not going to kill my brother, but I'm not going to, but I'm not going to help him either. He just like left it in the wasteland. So yeah, it definitely left a lot of things, explored a lot of things, and it did have the resolution as far as Colossus, and then as far as a viewer, I have to say Kirk made some very compelling arguments as far as why his brother should have been spared.
Right. I mean, he did leave him in a place where he did eventually get found. It wasn't a complete wasteland. He could have left him in some other bigger hiding spots.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He pretty much saved him.
Yeah.
Despite leaving him in the frozen tundra. And I agree with you. And I think you raise an interesting point that I didn't consider before, but with that Colossus and grief connection, and now heading into like what was teased in the previous episode, and then noted again at the end of this episode, this return of Gambit, who is very much symbolic of Genosha as a whole. And that loss was talked about and discussed at the beginning of the season, and now it just continues to manifest into episode 8, The Dead Man's Hand. Rogue has nightmares of an undead Gambit. X-Force brings Apocalypse's corpse to X-Corp. Genosha and the two groups join forces to track down Gambit, resurrected as the Horseman of Death. My only complaint about this episode is, oh god, it was annoying at the beginning. It started to get a little bit like, okay, all right, that's it. That's enough of the card puns. But I love me some Remy and Rogue action, so I am fine with this. I think that we could have even explored Remy a bit more. I kind of wish, now that I'm talking out loud about this season, I think what was missing for me was a flashback episode of Gambit. Something because we know what happened in Genosha and that loss. And also we know the relationship between him and Rogue. But I guess as an individual and also his connections with everyone outside of Rogue, I just think that it would have been better had we felt more of a connection directly to Remy as an individual, as opposed to what they really focus in is on Remy and his connection to Rogue. So I think then it would have been stronger because the stakes would have been higher.
Yeah, he became a vessel for Apocalypse as well. So I think having that, like you said, having at least maybe a episode or even a part of an episode prior to this of Apocalypse's, using him to become the Horseman of Death would have like added some deeper, but more, I guess, more emotional stakes to it than what we got. But but I guess they used it more to like, really focus it on, Apocalypse's journey, of course, and also where he was trying to like quickly, take the external, pulling that stone out of her. Then also, also getting back to, Cable, his overarching thing with this season, just, meeting his destiny to take out Apocalypse as well.
Right. Which I enjoyed that too. It's hard. I don't feel like the storylines got muddled.
Yeah.
I feel as though the way they structured it felt like we had a big focus on Cable for the first 2-3 episodes.
Yeah.
Then we went away.
Right.
And then we focus on Polaris, or we focus on Wolverine, and then we slowly get back to Gambit. And so what I'm saying is it's not like things got muddled, because it was a lot of the in these last 2 episodes in particular with, oh my god, we
were talking about Gambit and we were talking about Cable. Yeah.
Like, you haven't met my parents.
Yeah.
I I liked that, and I liked seeing that as a reminder of where we started this season. But I don't know, it just felt like there wasn't enough of a check-in to really make it feel like a strong through line. It felt like they had multiple through lines, so none of them were super strong. They were all like even, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, I mean, I think there were like phases throughout these 9 episodes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So like the first few episodes was really that, going back in time, sort of seeing the creation of Insabanur becoming Apocalypse, and then then episode 5 was sort of the drop in on Wolverine, and then the 7 through episode 6 and 7 really felt like we were just talking about the grief angle of things, and then these last 2, it's just like, oh yeah, now we're back to we're back to we did all of these things, plus we're going to get to politics and all the other things too, because we haven't talked about it, even like with with Xavier setting up X-Corps, and all the things that are going on with the U.S. government, with X-Force and Cooper, she trying to like, Val trying to keep the mutants under control, and like, screw that, X-Men company called X-Corps, where y'all can't have you have no jurisdiction over us as far as what we do.
No, it's pretty wild. I think though grief is the strongest storyline, because that touches on everything in very different ways.
Yeah.
And all of these storylines, I mean, the grief of Cable never having parents.
Yeah.
And then the grief of time constantly separating that. So like the grief Jean and Cyclops feel towards their son, and like having to give up that time with him for various reasons, as well as Morph, the grief of his own abilities and the loss of others around him and need to save other friends as well. So I think overall grief is strongest through line, which is why like the loss of Gambit in the first season was the big, almost a climactic moment in that season. And so to return to that, to have that character come back in this unfortunate situation where now he's back, but their enemy is taking hold of him, and they have him, but it's still, they don't have him yet. It is in hindsight a very well done. I'm just saying that these storylines all mixed together, it still doesn't feel like we spend enough time. I mean, to take it with from cable, it never feels like enough time. But then again, I think that's always the issue with X-Men, is that there's such an ensemble. There's so many characters that, you get a Polaris episode, but that also means you don't get to check in with half of the cast during that episode. Or you get a random Wolverine and Morph adventure. Again, you don't get to check in with half of the cast. So thematically, they can all center around grief, but they also tend to be not sticking with like one overarching arc, just one overall theme.
But to that point about the grief, and also, and then also the issues of sacrifice. Looking at the final episode, because of course, they go to ship, and and Hank and Kurt are there with Rogue, and they work at talking with the Celestial, and then it was pretty brutal as far as her, like she went into the Celestial and to negotiate, and seeing her body, her arms, I mean, skin getting ripped off and stuff. I was like, it's a bit much for little kids if you're watching that. But to the larger point of grief, and then and how we deal with grief, and Rogue's choice to basically sacrifice herself, so that she and the Gambit can come back, and she gets that amazing suit, and they have the moment, and then everything gets resolved, and then she's fine. Of course, Gambit's there. He was able to get extricated from Apocalypse as well, but they learned that Kurt's gone. And he sacrificed himself. He made a deal exchanged his life for his sister's. And so so yes, it was to that point about what we're discussing grief. The team was able to succeed and all, but again, it comes at such a price. And and of course now they're having grieve the loss of a friend.
Yeah. Was the Watcher in every episode?
I don't recall. I have to go back and look again. I think
it was. He was in like the last two.
Yeah.
There was one moment in particular where I'm like, okay, what are you gonna be doing? I forget if it was the last episode or the second to last episode that there's that clear
view of him.
So I'm just curious if he was even in the first season.
I do remember him. Yeah, I do think. Yeah, I do remember him showing up in the first season. But but I have to go back and look and see if he appeared. Of course, the times you talked about, but there were any other moments during the first half of the season where he appeared.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with you. It was a good. Did I completely understand what was happening with Celestial? No. I didn't really understand that. I was also very confused when Rogue just walked out, and I'm like, I thought this came with the cost of your life, but but then there was the swap later, so I get what they did, and everything you said is very valid. I also, the stinger at the end is that Mystique is back, and she kind of takes over Dr. Cooper, takes on Dr. Cooper's life. So we even get a tease, but But it is, and that's the other thing, like a classic comic book, like a classic episode of television in this genre, the heroes win, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah, big cost and they really set it up really well because, we earlier in the season, we have Creed running for president, and then, of course, for folks who may or may not know the backstory as far as Creed and Nightcrawler and Mystique and Sabretooth, being their parents as far as, Creed and Nightcrawler, and then, of course, whatever, now he gets, we learned that, before, Val's like watching the news and she sees that Creed is successful in winning the election. And then, of course, Mystique does come in and shoots her and of course, pulls the dossier. And so, again, it's really cool. They like, you know, go through her background. And you can see in the dossier, you see like, Anne Marie, that's Rogue. And then you see Creed's Graydon, and his name's blacked out. And then Kirk Wagner, of course, is Nightcrawler. So, so it was just a lot of just Easter eggs that they like packed into that end credit, but also they set a lot of those Easter eggs up throughout the season, and also building towards what's going to be the big, obviously Mystique's going to be clearly the big bad for season 3, and also the Brotherhood of Mutants coming back as well, because at the San Diego Comic-Con they did announce who all as far as the Brotherhood is coming back. Blob, Pyro, Avalanche, Toad, and so going to be the Brotherhood of Mutants, who are the evil team that'll be present in that 3rd season. So it'll be interesting to see if Creed legitimizes them as far as being a part of the government, and especially now given Mystique has taken over Val, who was head of X-Force. So so there's a lot of cool things that they really set up for the 3rd season.
Yeah. What makes you more excited for the upcoming live action movie? Is it this show or is it Spider-Man Brand New Day?
Oh, good question.
Just curious.
Both of them. I don't want to do the weasel out and say both. Do you think this show reminded me of how rich the X-Men tapestry is, to something you said earlier, how much it is an ensemble.
Mhm.
So it does, so you're right. It is very hard for them to balance like all of these various stories and characters, and you do have situations where we will, have the Wolverine story, and we'll check in on Charles dealing with, fighting with, with the Danger Room personified. But yeah, so I think I had to go with X-Men 97 and buy it. Yeah, as got me a little bit more hype for it than Spider-Man. As far as just the X-Men movie coming out that we got news, from D23 coming up.
I agree with you because I love Sadie Sink. I love her. That also, we didn't get a lot of Jean Grey. We got just enough for service of that movie. That wasn't really an X-Men movie.
No.
I am excited to hear about that speculation though, if Spidey is going to show up in the X-Men and just, I mean, they all are in New York apparently. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What I was going to say is why I think that this show has made me more excited is because of the whole Adam Driver of it all and Mister Sinister. Having watched the first season, when they announced that, do I agree with the way they announced that? No. That was awkward as hell. They did not play the way they thought that would play. It was just completely missed, but I do because at first I was really pissed. Well, I have to tell you, I was like, really? I don't see that at all. Magneto? No, I didn't see it at all. And then as soon as he said the other name and it was Mister Sinister, you're like, okay, I see that a whole lot more. That makes a lot more sense. And it's very much the fact that we're getting Mister Sinister, Emma Frost. I just like this idea. We're not going to spend another movie about Magneto and Professor X, okay? I'm sure we're going to get Magneto eventually, but we've been inundated and have to bring Spider-Man Brand New Day back up because that's all anybody's talking about right now. And the fact of the matter is that we got Osborn but we got Osborn in the same way we had him before. So, like what I'm getting at is the Tom Holland movies have not done a retread of those villains, and somebody on a podcast pointed this out, and I thought it was genius. And I never thought about it before. None of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies feature a true nemesis of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
The closest we get is No Way Home.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But
Right.
he's again from the Tobey Maguire movies.
I get you. So you mean Tom Holland's Spider-Man?
Spider-Man. Like,
I think the closest is Scorpion, maybe.
I mean, yeah, even that's the reach, and I'll allow it because I mean, sure, but it's Scorpion isn't front and center.
No, he's not.
No, it's very interesting, and it's not like Jean Grey hates Spider-Man. Spider-Man just is getting in her way of finding out the truth about her sister.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting point that is done on purpose, because this character and those villains, we have seen so many iterations, and yet we still come back for more. And so it was kind of almost like a reboot, refresh in a way. And now, given the current state of that character, you can bring on the big nemesis. And like the stakes are there. It feels more earned, I guess, as a hero. Especially as like a legacy hero. And I'm excited about that potentially being on a similar path of what they're doing here, where there's been plenty of TV shows, there's been plenty of movies about the X-Men. The movies, arguably, not really done right. So there's a lot of pressure for this to go good. But from that long rant, I guess everybody knows my opinion about Adam Driver being cast as Mister Sinister.
Yeah. Well, to that point too, when I did see that Adam Driver was named as Mister Sinister, I was happy that they went that route, because it definitely plays better, not only from the character, and again, just because of what we've seen about Mister Sinister in X-Men '97. For folks who may have not read, I will freely admit I haven't read as many X-Men comics, so I'm not like steeped in the lore there. But my entry and my knowledge of X-Men, again, comes from a lot from the comic, the cartoon adaptation of X-Men. And I know that, just like they do in live action, they will adapt, storylines from the comics, like even like X-Corps. I mean, that was something that was adapted for. It wasn't a one for one, adaptation from into the show. It never is, but they'll draw inspiration from the source material. But what I saw, to that point about, I'm glad he's not Mysterio. I mean, Magneto, excuse me. I was thinking Mysterio because I was thinking Spider-Man. I'm still like hung up on that point that person that you said about the, Tom Holland not having a true villain. Because I'm like, but I'll
Mysterio hated Tony Stark.
Yeah. And even with Michael
Tony Stark.
Tony Stark. Yeah. So it's even though they did show up in the Spider-Man movie. So I'm
not saying like his rogues gallery isn't present. That is not the argument.
Yeah. I know that's not
different things, which is very unique.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I digressed a bit but bottom line is I like the casting as Adam Driver there as Mr. Sinister, because it's spot on. Yeah. Question.
Okay. Question is, what are your thoughts on the Professor X casting?
Well, let's just run through the whole casting. So,
can I get your thoughts on this one? We're going to run through the whole casting. I just want to specifically know, because this one was the one where I have arguably the most interest in, just because it came. I know it was rumored, but it's a very different name. It's a much younger Charles Maurice.
Yeah, that's the place where I was kind of like, because honestly, a lot of the speculation and all the internet chatter and stuff, I've really just not really tuned into it at all. So whenever the announcements were made at D23 this past weekend, I didn't have any feelings strongly one way or another. other than what I texted to you over the weekend, which was, it was nice to see a chocolate storm. But beyond that, as far as what direction they were going to go, I didn't have any feelings. I will say though, I didn't watch Girls, so and I was looking at Abbott's IMDb just to see, if I was familiar with any of his work prior to this, and honestly, I'm not.
Yeah.
So
outside of Girls, that's the only thing I've really seen him in.
yeah,
But
the age limit there, given that he's only in his late 30s, I think maybe early 40s at most.
it would be 40. He was born the same year as my brother.
Okay. So the age difference, given that we've always seen Charles being more of a paternal influence for the X-Men, I wonder how they're going to handle that, given, he's only a few years older than a lot of these other actors.
Well, some, not all. There are a lot of young 20-year-olds on this cast as well, and makeup does an amazing thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Mandy Moore in her late 30s play a 60-year-old woman, okay, on This Is Us. So there are ways to make these actors look older, but I did watch Girls, and so it's just like, man, this is a girls crossover.
Adam Driver,
this is weird. But I like it because, to go back to your point about Storm casting with Maya Boyd, that's a theater actor, a virtual unknown on the big screen. So that brings a lot of interest and intrigue. And then I think the only one, arguably, we're not talking about Sadie Sink, okay? But the only one, speculation wise, that I felt pretty confident and was Kit Connor. The whole Inde Navarrette situation with Rogue, I remember bringing up to you that casting months ago when Obsession was out and people were starting to fan cast, and they fan casted her. So, but then the conversation changed, and Katie, she was in Beef season 2. Is it Kaylee Sweeney, or is it?
I think that sounds right.
Yeah. She, from Alien Romulus as well, she was apparently making strong pitches and effort to get that role. Both of them are short. I'm just going to put that out there because I've heard some people do complaints about the height. Both of them are short. So honestly, with Speedy, having watched Beef season 2 earlier this year, I was like, do not, because she's way too short. But Inde Navarrette is also very short. So here or there. Anyway, I'm not mad at the Inde Navarrette of it all, because when I heard that fan casting before, I was like, okay, well, if she's gonna get an Oscar this year for her part in Obsession, then of course she's going to get cast in the next big Marvel movie.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the cast. Yeah, I mean, as far as like, I guess Feige doing we're going with a name, because, getting a name, right as it's going to like really pop. Yeah, so so I'll give him that one for Inde. And of course, we're very familiar with their work from Superman and Lois. So.
Yeah. And I never had an issue with her as an actress. I want to make that clear. I always had an issue with the character she was playing and how she was written. I'm very much, for those wondering, I'm very much on the fence. And I probably will, before the year's out, watch Obsession. I feel like I know what it's all about, and I feel like I know how the story is going to go. So I kind of still want to distance myself, but I do need to watch it. And especially because with my Paramount account, it's free. So I have no reason not to watch it.
Yeah, you need to watch it. A friend of mine watched it. They said they thought the movie was overrated, but I got to just make my own judgment for that.
See, that's the thing. Like, of course it's overrated, because the only people who think that it's going to be rated are those who watched it like opening weekend, or the first ones at this point. So that's why I'm like, I need distance from all the conversation.
Yeah. What do you think about Kit? I mean, it's the person I haven't.
I'm not familiar with his work. So,
same.
I've my thoughts about casting was like, that name is the one that I've seen the most thrown out there. So I'm not surprised that it went to him. So that was my thought about Kit.
Yeah. Emma Frost, as far as Samara Weaving, I think that's a pretty solid casting, I think, there.
Visually, I think that's solid. And I say visually because I'm not very familiar with her work.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I mean, I think I've seen her, yeah. Yeah, that's just it. I mean, all of these actors, other than Adam Driver, I haven't really. I mean, clearly Maya, because I know she's a theater actress, and Juliet. She just premiered a film with Todd P. Henderson and Cedric the Entertainer. It's a Debbie Allen directed film called Joe. Let me I wrote it down. Joe's turn come and gone. It's the August Wilson play that's been adapted for the screen. That's her first screen credit. So it just released. So, but she was in Anne Juliet, and doing 8 shows a night on Broadway. So, or 8 shows a week or whatever. So on Broadway. So she definitely brings the acting chops there, and they did definitely cast. Definitely seems like they cast for the look, and Feige, best actor for the role. and I can't, speaking of podcasts, I overheard a funny conversation that took us back to when we watched The Studio, and Van Lathan on the Higher Learning today. I was listening to that podcast. So, and he was talking about the episode of The Studio where remember when they were like casting the
yeah, it was my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah, and they were getting all twisted in knots because of we can't cast this person because we'll have, we got to like tick all the boxes for like all these representative groups.
Yep.
And it reminded me of that, whenever I texted you over the weekend about, the whole biracial, conversations that's been around Storm with, Halle Berry in the past, and what was her name? I think Alexandra Shipp, who played her, and played a younger version of the character in some of the Fox movies earlier in the 2000s. But it was, I was thinking that same thing. But I think overall people are pretty, I have to say Kevin Feige nailed it this time, getting, having an African American actress who's not a biracial play it. I mean, it's just colorism's a thing. That's a big thing in the African American community. So I'm glad that they went that route, and I think overall people are pretty happy with that. Not only because of just that aspect of it, but she definitely seems to have the chops. And I saw some commentator note, like, it could be like the next Hugh Jackman, type casting when they cast him as a Wolverine for the first X-Men movie back in when it did that live action version.
Yeah, I heard that comparison about Inde because there's been so much backlash about her casting. Yeah, so you could say that about anybody because
Abbott's biracial, so the biracials got there.
There is such noise out there about casting.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, this is just casting. So there's got to be a good script, and everybody has to deliver. So we shall see on 5/5/28.
But I will say, Jake Schreier, who directed Thunderbolts, which we both really, really enjoyed.
I liked it more than Will.
No, don't go. I'm not going to do that. I freely admit I went into that movie with very low expectations, but I came out of it I really enjoyed that movie, so I'm not going to let you do that.
He also doesn't like Florence Pugh, everyone. But anyway, continue on with what you're saying. So
it's late, and like I said, I do. No, I'm just I think he'll do a good job directing this film. Bottom line. So
no, I appreciate that you bring up the director as well, and thank you for reminding me that he is the director of Thunderbolts. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's already been an interesting year for Marvel with Spider-Man: Brand New Day, and we got Doomsday coming.
We got the Doomsday. We got the Endgame encore too. So.
Yeah. So, and then Vision Quest as well. So things are coming, and then 2028, it'll be another like onslaught.
For sure.
But on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on all the socials at Will M. Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me there too at SJ Belmont, SJBLMONT. Please follow our crew on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Scene and Nerd. Follow on Blue Sky. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at scene_n_nerd. And visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.